So we're going to start with Professor Peter Munk. Peter is Professor of Radiology, Orthopedics and Palliative Care at the University of British Columbia and Section Head of Musculoskeletal Imaging at Vancouver General Hospital. He's a very experienced journal editor, including being editor-in-chief of the Canadian Association of Radiologists Journal, and also associate editor of the British Journal of Radiology. And he is an international liaison for the Asia Pacific Association of Medical Editors, for APAME. Peter, if you're there, we would love to hear your presentation. It's on predatory journals. What are they? Why should I care? And what's new? Peter, over to you.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Nick. Just let me share my screen with you. Okay. Okay. So can you see can you see my screen? See my slides?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, as Nick mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about predatory journals. I think quite a few of you probably have heard of them. Some of you may not have. It's an area that's interested me for quite a few years, and it really is the dark side of publishing. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on what they are, how they started, and if there's anything new happening in the last few years. So I have no disclosures that are relevant. So it all starts, of course, with the internet becoming a prominent feature in the medical and publishing and academic worlds. And almost immediately when it was started in the 1980s, or at least became more widespread in the 1980s, it was recognized that it was going to be a powerful tool for dissemination of information. And this could be done at low cost, virtually free. It's unfettered, unregulated. It was going to be a liberating sort of thing. It'd be a new model for information access, something truly revolutionary. And researchers immediately recognized this, and the concept of an open access journal became well known. And these are scholarly journals that are available online to readers without any sort of barriers. Traditional journals, you had to pay for access to these journals, hard copy journals in libraries. There are all sorts of technical and legal copyright issues. And the cost was really borne by the authors who often had to pay page charges, or of course sponsoring institutions that actually paid for subscriptions. So the characteristics of open access journals as we see them in the modern world are that authors retain their own copyright. The entire journal content is usually free, and a form of Creative Commons license is utilized, meaning that parts of it can often be freely used by readers, and this varies from one article to the next. And this concept is described in much greater detail at creativecommons.org for any of you that are interested. So the first examples of open access journals started in the 1980s, and these were generally computer science journals, and they didn't have very wide readership. And appropriately enough, the first open access journal that was medically oriented was the Journal of Medical Internet Research. And this was about 1998. But the number of open access journals expanded very, very rapidly. We can see from 2009, when there were only 4,800 of these journals, to 2022, where there's well over 20,000. As a matter of fact, it's hard to keep track of how many there are because there's a new one, it seems, every moment. And PubMed indexes at least 2,000 of these open access journals currently. And of course, that's increasing every month as well. And many major reputable publishers, they were used to publishing hard copy journals, realized they had to get in on this act too, and they made many of their journals, or at least portions of their journals, open access. And many new publishers arose that just produce open access journals exclusively, things like the Public Library of Science, Hindawi, and others. And a directory of open access journals is available at doaj.org. And this is a very valuable research tool for those of you that are trying to avoid predatory journals, which I'll discuss in a moment. This would be a typical sort of opening page for a open access journal. This one is PLOS Medicine, a highly reputable journal. So we get faster publication. There's less almost no cost to the consumer, but there is cost to the authors. They're more accessible than the hard copy journals ever were. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, as with anything, even though it looks like it's a big success, and it looks like it's going to be really good, all sorts of unexpected things can happen, and things sometimes don't end up looking the way you wanted them to. So it's a new perspective in publishing. So publishers have had to reposition themselves. They're no longer content providers to readers, but service providers to authors. And this was something that unscrupulous people learned to exploit. And before I go on and describe predatory journals, it's very important to remember that an open access journal is not the equivalent of a predatory journal, but all predatory journals are open access journals. So what is a predatory journal? Well, it's an exploitative open access publishing business. They charge publication fees to authors without meeting the usual scholarly standards or providing good editorial and review services you would expect from a traditional journal. And in this way, they produce essentially a markedly inferior product, and often poor research can end up getting published. So if this is the case, why are these a problem? Why are these journals successful? Well, if you look at authors, there's a pressure to publish. Sometimes it's demanded by the employment that you have. If you're ambitious and want to get ahead in your career, especially in an academic institution, it's something you really try to do. And sometimes it's just vanity. You want to be able to show this great published article to your girlfriend or boyfriend or mother. And it provides a much easier publication route than traditional journals, where there are a lot more hoops to jump. And they promise very rapid review and turnaround time. And especially with naive authors that have articles recruited from them by publishers that typically by email, they're flattered and they're sometimes unaware of the fraudulent nature of the providers of the services that they're being offered. So we care because what ends up happening is what ends up getting published is often poor quality because there's minimal to poor review. And you end up flooding the research world with all sorts of rubbish, really. It's hard to determine what proportion of open access articles in the healthcare sciences are predatory, but it's estimated to be somewhere in the 5 to 10% range, although you'll see different figures quoted in the literature. What it does is it really threatens the legitimacy of open access by putting a shoddy material out there. And a lot of this stuff will not be indexed by reputable indexing services, meaning that if the research is good, it may be inaccessible and can be lost. Like most publishers, there's a conflict of interest, of course, in that in open access, if a publisher accepts articles, they have more to publish and they have more money to make since they're charging the authors. But predatory journals have such low standards that they'll accept almost anything to publish. So you end up with an increasing number of citations of questionable or poor quality being quoted by sometimes well-meaning researchers, and you end up propagating misinformation, which can be dangerous. And the poor peer review promotes all the terrible things that we've been trying to avoid at APAME and other organizations, such as plagiarism and data falsification, as well as multiple publications. This is a significant enough problem that a position statement was issued last year by APAME, so the so-called Sydney Declaration, which was published in the Medical Journal of Australia, and it summarizes a lot of these things that I've just mentioned, if any of you want to access that. So predatory publishers typically solicit articles by email. They use email addresses they get from previously published articles, hospital and practice websites, and so on and so forth. And these emails will arrive in your inbox. I'm sure that many of you that have published before have been getting these for years, and sometimes you get multiple ones in a week. And they can be hard to tell sometimes. Sometimes these emails and these journals are of poor quality or amateurish if it's an inexperienced editor, although why you'd want to publish in a journal like that, I'm not sure. Or is it a predatory journal? But then there are a number of clues that you can look at. Often the web pages will look very good, so you have to really read them in detail. And what often is a tip-off is it's a journal you've never heard of. You can't find it listed in any of the reputable indexing services such as PubMed, Scopus, or the Web of Science. And many of these journals have an unusually broad range of topics covered, or a large number of journals by a single publisher, which you're also unfamiliar with. Looking for poor English, things like misspelled words, poor syntax, grammar, non-professional or odd language. Some of them even require copyright transfer, which open access journals do not do. And it's often difficult to find any mention of author charges or costs that can be hidden. And if you want to contact the journal, well, frequently you won't find a street or snail mail address, phone, or fax. And if there is one, sometimes you find it doesn't work. Or if you Google map it, it ends up in the middle of a turnpike in Nevada or something strange like that. So these may be fake. If these exist, they may be fake or have no response from trying to contact them by fax, for instance. The editorial boards can be questionable. They may all be from one country or even one institution. And they may look identical for multiple journals from the same publisher. And occasionally you'll find some name that you recognize, but that person may not even be aware of the fact they've been put on the list of board members. They typically provide a rapid turnaround time, sometimes a week or less, and they'll often request for a submission in a very short period of time. And in the letters that they send you, they may refer to a previous brilliant article that you published. This would be a typical one I got from rheumatic diseases, which I've never heard of before. And they will accept any type of article, but they want a very, very short turnaround. In this case, it was about 2 weeks. In the email at the bottom, they refer to a short technical note that I published, and they want us to flatter you by saying that they so much want your article, it'll even give you a big discount on the publication charges. And if you don't answer them, sometimes they'll send a follow-up email, and it sounds like they really, really want you. So isn't there an easier way to determine? Is there a black list listing guilty journals or a white list telling you which ones are great? The directory of open access journals lists journals that generally are reputable. So that's a helpful place to start. There is an outfit called Cabell's Lists, and they'll provide white and black lists. They're very expensive. They are aimed more at libraries than individuals. But even using these, you'll find that there's an overlap between predatory and legitimate journals. So it's not a silver bullet. So what about another category of predatory journals that we're seeing more of now? The hijack journal. And these are legitimate academic journals for which a bogus website is created. And this bogus website actually tries to tempt you to submit articles to them for a fee. And this first started about 15 years ago with journals that didn't have a website, only a print version, which is really not the case anymore. So there's a couple of journals in 2012 that fell into this problem. And they provided plausible web pages. And if you searched for the existence of a print edition, you would find it, but there's no website. So fake websites use the names of legitimate journals now. And virtually all journals will have a website that exists already. So often well-known journals are victims of this. And what these fraudsters do is they create a website that looks almost identical, but has only a slightly different address. They accept these submissions, and of course, they accept the money, but the article will never be published legitimately. And you can't find it anywhere else. And you certainly won't find it in the legitimate journal. So how do we find this? There's no simple surefire way, but there are important clues again. Look for spellings of the website. Sometimes there'll be small differences, like a letter might be missing. If you go to Retraction Watch, they provide a very useful list of hijacked journals. It looks a little bit like this. And so it can help you detect these hijacked journals in many instances. How about using AI? There'll be several more talks in this afternoon's session about AI. Will it help us with this? Well, experience is limited. There isn't a lot of data out there. And it's been used mainly in an effort to detect AI-generated papers and reviews, as you'll hear. Early results show that ChatGPT, for instance, can only detect about 30% of hijacked journals. There's more experience with detecting predatory journals, and some people have listed as much as 92% success in identifying predatory journals. So that may end up being a very important thing. This is an example of one of the papers that's been produced recently to that end. So what's the answer? Well, ultimately, a better education of the consumer, the authors, and awareness of the fact that the problem even exists. Some people have proposed an independent certification agency, but all sorts of problems. Who's going to run it, staff it? Yeah, what sort of independent agency is going to look over this, and who's going to pay for it? So there's still stormy times ahead. We have to be very vigilant.
Okay.
We're dealing with very sophisticated fraudsters, and it undermines the future of scholarly publishing. So we do have to pay attention to this. It is important. We need to develop a more robust way of policing open access to preserve its integrity, and that won't be simple. Is AI the answer, or is AI the problem? It's probably both. So with that, I'll leave you with that short summary of predatory journals. You can see two of the other authors sitting on either side of me in this picture that are going to be speaking later. And I thank you for your attention. I hope you found the talk worthwhile. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much. That was terrific. Really appreciate it. I'm going to open it up for any questions. We haven't got a lot of time, but if there are any questions, please raise your hand. Could I also ask everyone who's not speaking to please go on mute? We had somebody coughing who was not on mute during the presentation. So please go on mute if you're not asking any questions. Peter, what are we going to do about this disaster, though? It is a disaster. Already in the US, there are politicians saying, well, we can't believe biomedical research because it's full of fraudulent data or incorrect data or whatever, or non-reproducible data. So the whole integrity issue's really been raised at very high levels. So do you see a way out for us? Because even with all of the talks, all of the papers out there, all of the vigilance recommendations, people still publish in these journals or seem to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's like, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to police this, and it's really up to the consumer at this point, unfortunately, to be aware of the existence of predatory journals and how to not get involved in them. Some people, shockingly, don't really care if they're publishing in a predatory journal, as long as they have a long CV with all sorts of publications in it. You know, they want to show it to their institution, and if the institution isn't vigilant, they may not even detect it. And people like, you know, Robert Kennedy, maybe he thinks these predatory journals are great, and this is how you get the real truth out there. I don't really know. It's not going to be a simple thing, but it really is up to the consumer at the moment to be very wary. Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet that I can see existing.
And you know, I'm still perplexed by the number of journals that keep appearing. I can't understand this. I know there are more people doing research, but regardless, it's almost the opposite of, you know, the research volume increase to some extent, the number of journals out there. I guess maybe one way to police this perhaps would be to say we can't possibly have more new journals. This is just crazy. What do people think about that? Any comments on that before we move to the next presentation? I can't see any hands up. No, well, I'll leave it as a comment, but I think there are too many journals and I think we do have a problem with this and it's very significant. Peter, thank you for a brilliant presentation. We'll move on to the next one and appreciate you being up at this very late hour in Canada. So thank you so much.